Hello and welcome to this Business of Possibility podcast with Ulster University Business School. In this series, we've been taking a long, hard look at business here in Northern Ireland and in the global context. In this episode, we're looking at accessing and keeping the right talent. That's one of the really big challenges facing businesses today. So what to do about it? Well, let's talk to René Carayol MBE. He's a globally recognised keynote speaker and executive coach. Caroline van der Feltz is HR Director with Danske Bank UK. And Judith Wylie is Senior Lecturer, Ulster University Business School. And I'm delighted to have all of you with us today. We're going to find out more about the strategies that leaders can use to build more engaged and energised workforces. René, I think you've probably come the furthest, so we'll definitely start with you today. Just to kind of set the scene, what about those common talent issues that are facing leaders today?
So the first thing that I've seen over the last 10 years is maybe the biggest change in leadership I've ever seen, and it's been forced by talent. There was a time 10 years ago when the leader of an organisation, it was quite autocratic. It used to be the cleverest man in the room at the top of the organisation who was used to making every call, solving every problem, authorising every procedure. 10 years ago, only 10 years ago, the world was slow enough and incremental enough for one person to do that. Then we saw the mad advent of technology, multifaceted technology, complex technology, which brought a velocity, a pace that one person couldn't manage on their own anymore. And we saw the advent of the team, the executive team. And collaboration became the new leadership. But post-pandemic, I would never have predicted this. We've seen an environment now where your colleagues, your workforce, your people can be anywhere in any time zone, at any place, any given time, any place of work, with varied backgrounds, different languages, different cultures, different approaches, and your job is to harness that and get it moving in the direction where the business benefits. Command control doesn't work. That broke a long time ago. Now what I'm seeing and what we're coaching is leaders have to create an environment where everyone can flourish no matter what their background, enabling them to bring their authentic selves to their place of work, knowing they won't be judged, knowing they'll be valued, and they're wanted for who they are, what they believe in, and how they best contribute. That means a lot of changes for the leader. And the office is nearly the impossible place to lead from today. You've got to be visible, you've got to be connected, you've got to stand for something, and you're going to deal with the most varied workforce we've ever seen. It's the most challenging but the most rewarding time to be a leader ever. And as I'm to close off to get us going, as many would say, the war for talent is over. The talent has won hands down.
That's quite fun, quite good, actually, isn't it? Because there were so many people who talked about the war on talent. So now they have the upper hand. Are there some leaders who just can't cope with the way that things are now? I mean, are there some who have just had to realise that their time has gone?
I would say yes. We get into the debate I see most, and I don't think there's a universal answer to. I think that every single location needs to be taken as merits is hybrid or not, office or not, flexible or not. The one truism we've seen, if you're inflexible, you're not in play.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Caroline, it's a good point at which to bring you in, actually, and to hark back a little bit, because you and I have spoken before about the ways that Danske Bank had to change its way of operating. That's putting it very, very mildly. Over a weekend, if I remember correctly, when you shifted everyone to working from home. And everything changed, really, didn't it? And very much the way that René was talking about there, that different, command and control was somewhere else, really.
Yeah, and I think that really challenged some of our assumptions and beliefs that we held on what talent actually was. I think what we had was an environment where everybody was working at pace, everybody was making decisions, everybody was empowered to make those decisions as well. And I think in the space of talent, it was a bit of a crucible, really, and we really challenged some of our beliefs on what talent was. I think some of our talent assumptions going into COVID changed fundamentally when people were under pressure, and that really tested some of our talent in the organisation, and it brought forth new talents and new perspectives in people as well. I think when we did the pivot initially, many people went into that knowing it was a very equalising experience. Nobody had necessarily worked from the living room. We were an organisation that thought about flexible working for a while, but really it was not a default, and it certainly wasn't a widely deployed employee engagement tool. So it really challenged us to look at talent in a different way. It's really brought forth different talents and even enabled people to perform in a way that perhaps they weren't able to before. And it's really increased the confidence of our people across the organisation to show some of their talents and take some risks.
So there's been a massive sea change, really, as far as leadership's concerned and as far as talent's concerned. How, Judith, does a university keep up with that? I mean, I suppose you're expected to be ahead of the curve and be able to teach about these things. And there's this enormous shift going on around you and in your own organisation at the same time.
Well, absolutely, yes. We pivoted in much the same way, to online classrooms and online delivery, and, to take the lead on that in a very quick manner. But I would say we've changed a lot as well in terms of our model, or what you might think of in terms of higher education, or what you think of a university delivering. And of course, we have our undergraduate degree programs, and, we work with employers in terms of developing career-ready graduates. But really, at Ulster University Business School, we're all about people, we're all about the place. But more than anything, and probably the most important thing to me, is the partnerships piece. And that's to really drive and build sustainable futures. And we do that in partnership with a range of organisations, big and small. And I would say the key message, Wendy, is our doors are always open, and we are wanting to work together in partnership to deliver different models to make students ready at any stage. And that's a lifelong learning journey as well. So, we want to engage not just at that kind of graduate level, but also, within schools. And I would say to any employer to reach out and get involved in some of our schools networks and mentoring programs, because the world of work, as we've already heard, has changed so much. But we don't want to wait until kids get to 18 for them to get a handle on that. That has to happen, not even at secondary school, but at primary school level, and get kids playing and engaging with future of work areas, and building robots and coming onto campus, and looking at business challenges and knowing that this is something that they can get involved in and create that kind of inspiration or path. And the best way for us to do that is as a university, but also in partnership with business. And the other thing then as well is, and something that we do very well in Northern Ireland, is our apprenticeship programmes. And I'm just fresh this evening off the back of the Department for the Economy's Apprenticeship Awards, which, the key theme coming from that was partnership. Even Caroline, at Danske Bank as well, we work with Danske, we work with organisations of all sizes on our higher level apprenticeship programmes. And the talent that comes out at school leaver level into both the world of work and into the university setting is phenomenal. And the impact that those school leavers has been huge. And that's reflected, we had one of our students from our business technology programme, Kerry Moore, I'm delighted to say, is Apprentice of the Year. And Kerry came in, she's come through, she's the first in her family to have come to university, and she has just thrived, and she has given back through going out to schools and really, and schools across all areas, across all backgrounds. And you talk about diversity and inclusion, that's where it really starts. And that's where, somebody like Kerry can really inspire that next generation of, she's within the technology team, but, those guys coming through. So I would say just, if you're a business thinking about your talent, reach out, talk to us, engage, have a chat, whether your business is big or small, around some of the models that we have in terms of talent. So
we've got a great kind of spread around the table here, from primary schools, as you were talking about there, Judith, to René, who has worked with the top CEOs and executive teams from Fortune 500 companies all around the world. When those organisations are approaching talent, and this new talent that we're hearing about, who are if Judith has her way, going to be empowered from primary schools, and just right too. What are they then doing to create the right environment to identify the talent that they might not otherwise have noticed, actually, and harness it and help them to be the best they can be?
So Judith's story was fantastic because I every year I end up giving a talk at London Business School. And they have the class of 92, the class of 93. And they've still got the old-fashioned model that at the end of term, all the blue chip companies come around, and it's to come and prod and poke and see, can they tempt away the best of the best? It's a very old-fashioned way of doing things, but it's still there. Last year I was doing, it's the first one after the pandemic, and it's the first one that's live, and the place is packed, and you've got from BP to Marks and Spencer's to everyone's there, British Airways, everyone's there. And I did my piece, and at the end of it, I got a tap on the shoulder. And it was the head teacher of a school in East London. And she said, could you come and do that talk for our students? And wasn't going to be acceptable. 2 weeks later, I'm driving down to East London. When I got to the gates, it was Ainsley Wood Infant School. Infant school, it's infant school. Now, there's a careers fair, infant school, 5 and 6 year olds. The toughest audience to give a talk for in the world. Nothing's tougher no board is tougher than a group of 5 or 6 year olds. I walked in uniform, sitting cross-legged, you'd have heard a feather drop. Good morning, Mr. Carroll, said in unison. I was given 5 minutes. You know how hard it is to do this. Did 5 minutes. Seemed to be just about acceptable. Then we all went into the gym, and there was 12 stations and 12 different organisations, all uniform to make it more obvious. So there was the fire service, there was the ambulance service, nurse, there was guys, fitness instructors from the gym, but they went in groups of 3 and 4 and stood and listened to the pitch from each organisation. It was phenomenal. And I learnt so much. But I remember the head teacher saying, 5 or 6, you've given them a dream. That makes them so focused for the rest. Just give them a dream of who they might be, where they might be. And I learned ambition can start at any time. And she said, it just gives them something, a purpose, a dream. So to your point, it starts anywhere.
Purpose is an interesting one too, isn't it? Because when you hear from a lot of the young apprentices, and we've spoken to quite a number of them, including Clark from Danske Bank, who will run the world one of these days, and various other ones, but the purpose is very interesting, because one of the things that they really get out of apprenticeships is the fact that they're doing something that actually is some use, rather than forgive me, Judith, rather than just being at university, and maybe working in a bar in the evening or doing some other kind of a role. And that is something that people need, that, don't they? They need to have something that kind of gives them a raison d'etre for being at work.
Two of the drivers we see, overwhelming drivers why top talent stays with you, is a purpose-driven organisation. That is, why do you do what you do? Not what you do. What you do, we can measure that, we manage that, that's okay, but why do you do it? Am I making a difference? Am I part of something special? Have I got something I can believe in? Have I got something to belong to? I feel part of something special. That motivates me, gets me out of bed. The old days that it was just a salary, I don't think that works anymore. We need something more than that. The second thing is, I want to be included. I'm not a resource. I want to be part, I want to belong. I don't just want to be an employee number. Please notice me. Take care of me, because I'm going to give you everything I've got. The fair exchange is, now you care about me and I'll care about you. We never had that. It was more transactional when I was young. It's not now. When companies get it right, the productivity and performance goes through the roof.
Maybe that's a good point to bring you in, Caroline, because I'm sitting beside the HR director of a 3-star world-class employer, top company to work for in Northern Ireland, top financial services company to work for in the UK. So I was going to ask you what your approach to talent and embedding talent empowerment is, but clearly whatever it is you're doing, it's working.
Well, I think people have really got behind that ambition to be the best place to work, and that's been really exciting, I think, for everybody right across the organisation. I think the other thing that we see is the role of leaders being talent makers, not talent takers, and I think that has really excited the organisation and brought a whole range of possibilities forth as well. And I think whilst the accolades in terms of where we've got to in the best companies sort of results and where we shape up across the UK is certainly really reassuring, it really isn't the purpose that we entered into that journey on. It was really about trying to unlock talent across the organisation. It was about trying to listen to employee voices in an innate and intent way that we hadn't done before. And actually it was about creating a really great work environment where we would actually be commercially successful as well. Happy people equal great business, right? So for us, there's been a whole range of benefits that have come that have actually really distilled pride across people in the organisation. They're proud to work for a company like that.
Some of the changes that have been taking place over the last few years have fed into that quite well too, haven't they? I mean, when we were talking to Clark and the other apprentices in one of our previous podcasts, Danske were talking about how people who were working there already were seeing these young whippersnappers, as one of my bosses would have called them in the bad old days, but we're seeing them come in doing these terrific apprenticeships, and they were saying, well, actually, I'd like to do that too, and that's what they're now doing. And you've got quite a number of people who are reskilling and have gone into apprenticeships now.
Absolutely, and we've got a fantastic partnership in terms of our Danske Futures programme with Ulster University, and we have a range of different degrees. So people join our organisation from school, absolutely, and we've got people doing degrees in fintech and software engineering. We've got people doing leading customer operations. But actually what's been really interesting, and I think I have a degree of discomfort with the term apprentice because of the connotations of that, what that brings. But when we looked at our Tech Futures programme, and that really looks at those digital and IT skills, we had two things that we wanted to do. One, incredibly difficult market to recruit on. We needed to be talent makers, and we wouldn't attract the supply and demand. In Northern Ireland, it's the second biggest tech hub in the UK, outside London, and a huge war for talent. And the second piece was, how do we make people's careers much more sustainable? How do we equip them with the skills that are going to take them into the future and keep them employable and in enriching careers? So we went out and we actually had an internal only ring fence programme looking for applicants, and we had a whole range of internal employees who applied for that. One who is really inspirational is a lady called Elaine McRoberts. She's a grandmother, and at the stage in her career she shifted, and she has now come through and got a degree in IT and is working in that area. We've had colleagues who've been in operations who are now building our robots, and what that's done, I think, is build that real sense of, you know, a career today can be a completely different possibility tomorrow, and that's really supported our apprentice programme. And actually we've built it really by stealth. We've got about 83, so it's about 7% of our employment totally is actually studying for a degree. So I think that lifelong learning concept, that ability to shift, to learn new things, but actually the commercial help that gives us, making sure the skills are what we're looking for, we're tapping into gaps in the markets, and we're creating new careers for people, has been a really exciting journey to be on.
Well, that's good news for the Ulster University, I suspect.
I was just about to say, Caroline, yeah, it's another really important point, the lifelong learning. So, you know, we've spoken that primary school, the school leavers, the graduates, which again is a really important, pool of talent. But, you know, I would feel really passionately as well about maybe somebody that's taken a career break or has come out of the workforce. And how do you kind of give those people that have been lost, in a sense, that maybe feel like the pace of change that we've been talking about, you know, that they need to upskill, reskill. And that's something that, you know, as a business school, as a university, we're very conscious about designing programs that are accessible, about building those future business skills, to make sure that people are ready for the future of work and building that confidence and you know, making that step maybe into a new role or back into the workplace as well in terms of a talent pool. So that's very important to us, and a lot of our programs, you know, we know people within the workplace want to develop and grow. It's not just about, you know, maintaining the status quo in your role. It's about what's next. How can I reskill? How can I look to the future? So we work a lot with business to see what are your needs in terms of what your staff are looking for as part of their development and that sort of fulfillment side of their job, and feeling part of the place of work, and how they're developing their skill sets as well as you stepping up the career ladder.
And what Judith and Carol both describe is what I would call inclusion. Mm-hmm. Inclusion means everyone. Yeah. It's everyone. And it's beyond age, it's beyond race, it's beyond faith, it's beyond ethnicity. I grew up in a world where careers were vertical, incremental, and went one way. That's old hat now. And at some stage, your career would become obsolescent because you'd peaked. And you'd feel that. And what's left for you? Stagnation. No, not today. Careers are not horizontal or vertical. They're driven by the trust you have in your business and organization. And they're looking for where can you bring out the best of you? And how does the business benefit from the best of you? But it takes a different sort of leadership. You've got to be more in touch. You've got to be more visible. You've got to care more. You've got to have a bit of compassion. And it's a very different sort of leader that can do that. And what you're doing day in, day out is you're coaching. You're coaching day in, you're not telling. You're getting the best out of everyone, recognizing that everyone is brilliant at something and no one's brilliant at everything. And the focus is no longer on your limitations. Let's get your limitations up. No, let's fine-tune the things you're brilliant at already. That's your career accelerator. Not kill you by having to go and do the 5 things you're useless at for the next 10 years. That may not be the most enjoyable. But if you've got something you're brilliant at, the coach will find it out.
Do companies have to have more of a generosity now? Because, quite a lot of the time, these people that they're encouraging, empowering, and so on, are going to go and work somewhere else. Now, maybe because they want to. In some cases, it's because the company that they're working for is changing and it's something that they need to do. But do you have to just be, I suppose, content yourself with the fact that you are going to lose some of your really good people and you're going to have to get other people in? It's
a great, insightful question. I might turn it around. I might turn around and say, in the war for talent, let's be very clear, talent has won, hands down. You want to compete in this game? I think you need to think about the journey they can have with you. And that journey may continue elsewhere. But when they leave, you want them to be the biggest advocate for what they've left behind that you could ever find. That's the fair exchange. I don't think any of us are going to do the 30 years in one company anymore. But the time we spend together is going to be mutually beneficial. We're both going to celebrate that, no matter how long it is. But I think now, don't expect your people. I remember the term golden handcuffs. I've got a great bit of talent. They're going to be exposed in the marketplace. Golden handcuffs, please. Tie them to this business. That's just going to encourage them to leave. I think ensure we're growing them, ensure we're giving to them, ensure we're developing them. They'll give back to us. And I don't think the fair exchange is around time anymore. It's about experience. And if we both have a wonderful shared experience, we look forward to perhaps crossing paths again in the future.
It's an interesting situation that we're in at the moment, and all of what we've been talking about already, but also the fact that for the first time, probably there are potentially 5 generations in any current workforce. You were talking about your granny who had reskilled. I know the feeling. So how do you effectively manage a multi-generational team? Because I know from my own experience of being in that situation, it can be quite difficult. Balancing different employee needs where, you have people who are maybe my age who are sitting working with people who are the age of their grandchildren, not even just their children. Big generational difficulties. And yet there's kind of whole world of experience and there's that whole new innovation bit that comes with young people who can, who are much better at doing things, and some things, and you're much better at doing others. Anyway, I'm wittering, but how do you manage that? And I mean, Danske has obviously been doing that very well.
I think it's meant that we've had to become much more sophisticated across the board on everything. So if I take policies, for example, simple policy-based decisions before were very ingrained and very regimented. And I think as we've progressed and as different generations have come in and we've had much broader generational representation across the workforce, we've really got to understand the employee experience, and in a policy architecture, that's guiding principles rather than rigid policy. So some examples of that would be, some of the topics that we're talking about. Menopause, for example. We would never have talked about menopause 5-10 years ago in the open way that we expect both, all of our genders to talk about that. We have a manifesto. We've got menopause leave, to understand that people need support as they get older, as they go through different life changes. But I also think that things like the drivers as well, career breaks, really, really interesting experience in our career break policy. We've got gender 50-50, so it's not all about women going to do some caring responsibilities or look after children. Actually, the 50-50 piece is a really good reflection on our culture, but also that fact that people want to choose to work at times and to choose to step off at times as well and be supported by the organisation. And I think even when it comes to things like reward and choice, we need to realise that different people are looking for different things at different stages in their life. And what you need to do is to give a much broader set of choices that they can pick from. So if I am, I've just been through COVID, I've just left university, or I'm doing my apprentice programme through University of Ulster, I may want to buy more additional leave, and I would want to travel because I haven't had that experience that I might have done when I was younger. And we have seen our purchasing of additional leave double. Which is significant, and it really gives us insights and indications on what's important to people now. Similarly, grandparents' leave. So we know there's so many generations in the workplace at the moment, and that draw and helping a sort of a family, it takes a village, right? And grandparents want to play a really important role in the upbringing of their grandchildren. So we give paid grandparents' leave, which again would not have been something we would have done 5 and 10 years ago. So policies are becoming very specific and focused, and there's a selection and a range that really come into play depending on your life experience and the event that you're going through.
Did you find it easy to take that through with your executive colleagues?
I think we're really lucky. It was part of the cultural journey where we were having some really open conversations. We'd done a lot of work around adaptive leadership and thinking about how do you lead with the employee and in service of the employee as well. So I think we had a really good mindset at that point in time. I think the external environment has helped. The whole emphasis on leaders looking at actually talent, people and profit as an equal footing has really helped as well. So people are seeing the commercial benefits of having great people policies which create a great place to work, which means people thrive and perform, talent stays, and therefore it's a virtuous circle.
And I love that and I admire that. Yet we still hear in the business pages on a regular basis, I'm ordering my people back to the office. It's nearly caveman stuff.
And I think there's a balance. I do strongly believe that people need people. And I also think that there's types of work that people do better, either alone and concentrated time or connected time.
That's far from the command control I'm talking about.
Well, I think I do genuinely think that the goal, because we also hear about 4-day weeks and we hear about the next new fad that's going through.
I'm praising you, Caroline. I'm saying that you are early in this. You are at the forefront. If I look at most of the clients I'm working with, we do get that. I don't know any one firm that totally doesn't get it, but there's a fight taking place.
I totally agree, and I think any organisation that says they've got it licked, they've got the perfect answer, is an incredibly naive organisation.
I agree with that. But you're doing some incredibly brave things. They're bold, and they will pay off. The only reason you're doing them is because they're paying off. They're the right things. But I wish I could see more. And I would say I wish I could see more in financial services, especially.
Yeah, and I think there's a number of different drivers in that. You know, the current employment market in Northern Ireland is incredibly difficult. It's incredibly difficult in the UK. Northern Ireland is the most employed in the second place out of the 12 regions. So it's a really good force to reinvent. So there is that sort of driver to be an attractive place to work. But I also think there's a really important purpose in this for us. So irregardless of that, the purpose is about making sure that we are a very attractive organisation, that people really can come, be themselves, work hours that work with them. And René, you know, during COVID, it was a really great experiment. We had 70% of our people doing roles they weren't normally doing, and they were doing it at times we would certainly not normally have countenanced them doing. But that was a necessary experiment. It was a necessary survival technique to be able to keep the bank open, to be supporting our corporates, supporting our personal customers, and it worked. And we've taken a lot of those lessons.
Authenticity that you're coming at it with, and not just in terms of, well, it's a war on talent and we'll do this because it'll set us apart, and it's a sort of a competitive piece. Mm-hmm. I think that, you know, I'm working with Gen Z, I'm working with these, you know, this next generation coming through all the time, and I see, you know, sometimes they get a hard time for being on TikTok or being, you know, stuck to their phones, but I see the innovation, I see the problem solving, I see, you know, what these guys can bring to the workplace. But they are conscious of sustainability issues. They are conscious of, you know, greenwashing and organisations maybe telling them it'll all be flexible when in reality it's not. So they're much more aware of that authenticity. So I think, you know, if you're coming at it as you are from the right place, then, you know, the results will flow naturally from that, and it's a natural thing and a natural development. And if you are that kind of trailblazer or thought leader, you know, obviously we would hope that it would set the expectations for others to move that way as well. And somebody has to be the first to adopt these things. You know, it was the same with the apprenticeships, you know, to take that leap, to take people on at 18 and put them in the workplace and put them in front of clients. It's the same with, you know, that workplace, you know, flexibility. And we are seeing graduates and are seeing apprentices being much more conscious of asking questions, not just about pay or not just about, you know, what sort of work will I be doing, but about what is your purpose piece, what, you know, what development am I getting out of the organisation, what are your sustainability practices? So we're seeing these questions being asked.
All of those questions that we never asked whenever we were in interviews.
Absolutely,
you know, when they say, anything you'd like to ask us? No, not really. You know, what about your holidays and so on? And René, when I hear all of this, and you know, we've got this talented workforce, as Caroline was saying, and amazingly for Northern Ireland to be one of the areas in the UK where there is the least number of people available for working. It used to be very, very, very different a few years ago. That must be a bit of a challenge for you if you're dealing with these leaders who maybe are a bit, my words, not yours, boneheaded about all of this. How do you assist them in the transition to having a maybe more compassionate and caring leadership style?
So it's interesting because leaders see what they want to see. We've got to open their vista. So a story for you. 3 men working on a building site in the burning sun. Breaking rocks is the toughest work you've ever seen. The journalist comes to the first one and says, "Why do you do this work?" "I haven't worked for 3 years, so the first job I could get." Second one, "Why do you do this job?" "I've got a wife and 3 kids to feed. I took the first job I could get." Third one, "Why do you do this job?" Looks up proudly, wipes the sweat from their brow, leans on their shovel and says, "I'm helping to build a cathedral." Mosque, temple or synagogue, depending on where you are. But it's more than a manual job. This is purpose. This is inclusion. And it's the role of the leaders to make everyone in the company feel as though they're helping to build that cathedral. The stained glass windows, the spire. But it's not just at the monthly town hall. It's every day. Every day reinforce. We're here to build that temple. We're here to build that synagogue. We're here to... You're not a cog. You're essential. That's purpose. And we still don't have enough leaders who connect into that. And what Caroline was saying, I love, I respect and I love. It's connect what they're doing to community, to customer, but most of all to them. To them. If you get them bought into this, magic happens.
How, I suppose just as a kind of final point, because I believe it or not, we've been talking about this for half an hour now, and I'm well aware that you probably all quite like to go and get your dinner or go and enjoy the sunshine now that it is shining. What advice would you offer to managers and leaders, each of you, wanting to build a more engaged, a more skilled and a more energised workforce? Caroline, what would you say?
I think the assumptions that we know best need to just dissolve. So for me, building the most engaged workforce actually comes with involvement and inclusion, but involvement very much as well. So I think creating the environment of psychological safety where people can speak truth to power, that people believe they've got a purpose, but also that they're being listened to. I think the job of leaders to make work enjoyable and actually restorative to the biggest job that I see leaders doing is simplification, because things have got so complex. If the one thing to engage and to enable employees across organisations is simplification. So I think when work is simple and people have a strong purpose, where they feel that they're listened to, where they're coached to be better, where there's a real degree of risk being taken to develop people across, where leaders see themselves as talent makers, not talent takers. I think that kind of culture, that kind of environment, which is a range of possibilities, engages people in no way that a course or a handbook or anything else would do. It's down to the lived experiences of whether an organisation says what it's going to say and does what it says it's going to do.
Judith?
Well, of course, I'll say reach out to your business school and engage. I really do mean that. Whether it's an event, whether it's, getting involved with designing a course, supporting with the school's outreach work, developing apprenticeships, creating lifelong CPD. There's so many stages at which, we can engage and get involved, because it comes back to that people piece. And if people feel that they're being developed, that they are being invested in, that they are upskilling, reskilling, they will be more motivated, in their jobs, and they will add value as well. And on the research piece, the evidence base for all of this that we're talking about, if we're talking about convincing boards this is the way forward, that sort of transfer of knowledge and engaging with us around the research side as well as the people development and the talent development could be a really powerful way forward. So I suppose I'll end with our doors are always open, and we're always more than delighted to have conversations and to engage.
Extra brownie points for that. René?
So if I look at the senior executives that we are working with, we're coaching, 90%, if not more, are well-intentioned. But there's a fear. There's an inherent fear of the unknown. We all have this. We're really good at what we've always done, and we've become great at it. Don't want to let go of it. But engaging with something that's brand new and may feel unproven. It's not been out long enough to have tons of data, but we're getting lots of great feedback from it. That's what I'm encountering. And I've been brought up not to make mistakes. I've been brought up to get things right. That's not the world we're in anymore. And I've got a coach in, the only mistake is the one you don't learn from. Sounds easy, but that's really tough when you've been zero. We do not make mistakes. Zero defect right first time. That's how I was brought up. Now we're saying, make them, learn from them in a controlled fashion. So my overall thing is, if you're bold, you might fail. If you're not bold, you will fail. Simply.
In a nutshell.
Yes.
It's been a real pleasure and privilege talking to all three of you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, René. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Caroline. This is a Business of Possibility podcast in association with Ulster University Business School. You can find more episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Please review and rate us. And thank you very much for listening.